Boker Tov, everyone. Very good Erev Shabbat to everyone. This week's Parsha and Chukat, we are provided with a window of some understanding of how events occur in the world, especially as they relate to Klal Yisrael. The Gemara says, "Hakol b'shvil events have a connection to the Jewish people, because we are assigned by heaven to be the special people, and to therefore events that occur to us are exemplary and are lessons for all of humanity, and not only for the Jewish people alone. And heaven plays a very long-term game, so that one does not see immediately, or even within the space of 100 years, the true import of events that occur. So in this week's Parsha, the Jewish people fight two wars. One against Sihon, the king of Amori. You should know the Amori were the major tribe in controlling Eretz Yisrael at that time. And Sihon is the great warlord. And the other war is against Og, the giant that's the king of the Bashan. Today we would say the Golan, Syria. And the Jewish people are successful in both wars. And both Sihon and Og are killed in the wars. And the Jewish people inherit their property. But the Torah teaches us that their property wasn't really their property, because property goes through many changes in history. So the Torah records for us a whole series of events, how Sihon came to be the one that was able to rule over Transjordan, and then the Jewish people fought with them. All of this is to answer a question which is obvious from the Torah. The Torah tells Moshe Rabbeinu, when the Jewish people come to Edom, that Edom is descended from Esav, so it's the land of your brother. Don't make war upon them, and don't take away their territory, because I've given this territory to your brother Esav, and he has to own it. So the Jewish people make a detour. Instead of going straight west to cross into the land of Israel, they turn north to look for another path to come into Eretz Yisrael. This other path leads them now to the territory of two other nations, Ammon and Moab. Now, Ammon and Moab are descended from Lot, who also are our relatives. Ammon and Moab were created from Lot and his incestuous relationship with his two daughters. And that's where their names come from. Ammon is from my people, Ami, and Moab is from my father. So the Torah says again to Moshe, don't make war on Ammon and Moab. Don't try to take away their territory, because I've given it to Lot. It's part of my agreement with Avraham. So the agreement with Avraham happened 400 or 500 years before. So that's, to put it in our terms, France can't go back to Germany. I mean, Germany can't go back to France and say, give us back Alsace-Lorraine, because it belonged to us before the First World War. That's bygones. And here, because of the fact that Lot did not tell the Pharaoh that Sarah was really the wife of Avraham and not his sister, or she was not the sister of Avraham. So because he kept his mouth shut, so I give him a reward that hundreds of years later, his descendants will not have to make war in order to retain their property. Ammon and Moab, the Jews can't make war upon them. So first of all, that gives us some sort of window as to how heaven looks at things. Heaven has long patience, so hundreds of years are nothing. And secondly, heaven rewards even for incidental behavior. He didn't do any great things, Lot. He shut up. Well, in our world, being quiet is a great thing. There are not many that have mastered that art. The Gemara says, Mila Bechad, saying a word, every word is worth one golden coin, but shtika betray. But silence is worth 2 golden coins. But we live in a world of cacophony of sound. You have to be able to speak. So that's how the Torah sets it up here. You can't do anything with Edom. You can't do anything with Ammon. You can't do anything with Moab. Past commitments. I've promised it away. I told Esau that he's entitled. Okay, so you can't take it away. But then the Torah tells us that they did take it away. That the land of Ammon and Moab, which today would be Jordan and parts of Syria, were incorporated into the Jewish people. We'll see later in the Chumash that the Bnei Gad and Bnei Ruvain take that land to be their home. So how did the land that was promised to Ammon and Moab and that the Torah said that you're not allowed to make war against Ammon and Moab, how did the lands of Ammon and Moab end up as part of the Jewish nation, part of the territory? So the Gemara says the answer, because the question should be obvious. The Torah will not self-contradict itself in a few verses. It says we're not going to touch Ammon and Moab, and then it says we're going to conquer Ammon and Moab. So the Gemara says a very short and pithy statement. Ammon and Moab tiaru b'Sihon. The lands of Ammon and Moab became permissible to the Jewish people to conquer because of Sihon. What's the story with Sihon? Sihon, who was this great Amorite emperor, as part of his empire, he conquered Ammon and Moab. And he incorporated their territory into his domain. So when the Jewish people came along, they're not fighting Ammon and Moab any longer. They're fighting Sihon. There is no prohibition to fight Sihon. Not only no prohibition, the Torah tells Moshe to fight Sihon and to take his territory. So Ammon and Moab tiaru became permissible. The prohibition was removed because of Sihon. Because Sihon took their territory and the Jews end up fighting Sihon, and it's not considered fighting Ammon and Moab. So again, there are a few lessons here. From the Chumash and the Gemara, it's obvious that heaven put Sihon into such a commanding position and made him the emperor so that he would take away the prohibition against Ammon and Moab, and that the Jewish people would later be able to incorporate Ammon and Moab into their territory. So the Ribono Shel Olam operates, so to speak, through people, through historic events, through what it looks like the usual wars, territory, etc. And the purpose is eventually that the Jewish people should inherit that land. But it comes, the Gemara says, ba'akifin, it comes with detours. It doesn't come directly. Events have to occur. When you put all those events together, then the Jewish people will be able to incorporate Ammon and Moab into their territories. So that is the Torah's view how things happen in the world. There are events that do not occur because the Ribono Shel Olam somehow made a commitment hundreds of years earlier that they shouldn't occur. So for 400 years, Lot receives his reward. For 400 years, the grandchildren of Lot, the great-grandchildren, all of the generations are successful. They own the property, No one threatens them. All because Lot did a favor to Abraham that he kept silent. And he didn't say that Sarah is his wife, not just his sister. But there's an expiration date. We're accustomed to expiration dates on food products. Many times has nothing to do with anything, but there's a date on it. So there's an expiration date on commitments as well. The Gemara asks, for instance, Ad mosai schus avos. How long is the merit of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov to be counted to help the Jewish people? What's the expiration date on that? So, for instance, when we talk about the Akedah, and we have it as part of our Rosh Hashanah service, so we are saying the expiration date never occurred yet. The schus of Yitzchak and Avraham in the story of the Akedah still remains valid. And that therefore, because of that, we are entitled to survival and success. There are certain other things that the expiration date did occur. How long the temples would exist. First Beit HaMikdash was 410 years. The second one was 420 years. But when the expiration date came, the temples no longer existed. But the survival of the Jewish people is without an expiration date. Ve'erastichli le'olam. Our commitment to God, and so to speak, His commitment to us, is without an expiration date. It's forever. So this is how we have to look at events in history. This is how we have to look at many, many things. I just say these things so that you would have some understanding. I'm not speaking in the name of heaven, and I'm not a historian. It's not my profession. But let's look at just a few events over the last 200 years. The First World War. First World War was the most illogical war ever fought. There was no reason to begin it. It was a bloodbath. It destroyed Europe. Its effects still are felt. And it created the Second World War. And it created the Holocaust. Why? So the historian will tell you well, the Kaiser wanted to expand Germany. He felt threatened by the alliance of France and Russia, hemmed them in on both sides. That's why it occurred. Rav Kook has an essay, and he said, out of all of this, and he wrote it in 1919 when he still was in England, He said, out of all of this horrendous war that killed over 20 million people, what's the purpose here? What does heaven want from us? So he said then, Chacham Odif Minovi. I'm going to fly that. It's interesting to me. A wise man is more than a prophet. So he said in 1919, this is part of the process that the Jewish people will return to the land of Israel. And in order for this process to kick in, you needed this terrible war. Without this terrible war, it couldn't happen. The Ottoman Empire ruled Palestine. The Ottoman Empire is not going anywhere. They're not going to create a Jewish state. They're not going to even let Jews emigrate to the land of Israel. So how do we change that? So we change that by getting rid of the Ottoman Empire, which is one of the results of the First World War. And instead we substitute the British Empire. The British Empire are Sihon. They get rid of Ammon and Moab. They get rid of the Muslim control of the country. And now it's under British control. Now the British are not anxious to make a Jewish state either, but somehow they were trapped into allowing for the immigration of Jews into the land of Israel. The Balfour Declaration, and the peace treaty at Versailles, and the San Remo Conference. So all of this is the front page news. No one reads that as a piece of Tanakh. But that's exactly what it is. That's Ammon and Moab, Tiaru B'Sichon. The British Empire gets rid of the Ottoman Empire. Now, the Jews are going to make a war against the British Empire. Now, the war against the British Empire is not a religious war. It's not a war against Christianity. And Christianity is already then on the wane. No one sees it as a religious war. Whereas if the Ottoman Empire would have remained, then that's a religious war against Islam. A war against Islam brings in all sorts of other complications. So then eventually the Jews make the war against Britain. Britain leaves the country. And we know more or less the story afterwards. So when you look back at it, you have to say that even though all of these events are disconnected, when the Kaiser invaded France, he never intended to help push forward the idea of a Jewish state. It certainly didn't enter into his plans. But that's just like Sihon never intended by conquering Ammon and Moab to facilitate the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu would be able to conquer and incorporate those territories under Jewish control. So that's one view of history. That view of history is there are no incidental events. Somehow, it all makes sense. Even though it may take hundreds of years for us to realize what the pattern looks like or why things happen. For instance, Og. The Chumash says, Og melech haboshen, the great king, the giant. The Torah says that Og was the last of the giants. The Gemara says that we met Og earlier. Vayavo Apolit, when Lot was captured in the War of the Kings, so a man came, a Polit, a refugee, someone that escaped the war, and he told Avram Avinu that Lot was captured. So the Medrash asked, so who was this man? The Medrash says that was Og. Now Og, the Medrash said, had an ulterior motive here. He thought that Avram would get killed in the war, and he would be able to take away Sorah, and he'd be able to take away Avram's property, etc. He had an ulterior motive. But he did something good. He came and told him, your kinsman is captured. And Avram immediately, Vayorek es Chanichav, he mobilizes the people with him, and he goes to war and he saves Lot. So Og did him a favor. He didn't intend to do him a favor, but the result is that he did him a favor. So you have to pay him back. In heaven, nothing goes unrewarded and nothing goes unpunished. Even though it may take who knows how many generations for it to play itself out. And heaven has patience. So hundreds of years later, the Jewish people meet Og again. Now Avram meets Og again. This time Og is aggressive. Og originally thought that Avram would be gone by now. The Medrash says that even by the bris of Yitzchak, Og said, I will squash this baby with my thumb. And here, hundreds of years later, the nation is still here. So he mobilizes his army to make war. Nobody ever defeated Og. He's a giant. And Moshe kills him. And the territory of Og is incorporated into Transjordan, which will be given to the tribes of Israel. So it takes hundreds of years for this story to play itself out. Since we are not blessed with hundreds of years, so we are never around for the beginning of the story, and we're never around for the end of the story. So it's like you, lahavdol elef avdolos. But like if you come in the middle of a movie and you leave before the end, and then somebody asks you, what was the movie about? You don't know. You don't know what the beginning was, and you don't know what the end is. You don't know the plot. You only know the few minutes that you saw. So that is how events occur. That's the insight that the Chumash wants us to have from these incidents that it records for us. That we should not think that these things are accidental. We should not think that somehow it doesn't all fit into the pattern that heaven wants it to fit into. So the same thing is true in our time also. We're in the middle of a war. It's a war that even if we win, we don't win. The main question is, well, what about the day after? Who knows what's going to be the day after? Anyone that thinks that one knows is very, very arrogant. But that's the nature of human beings. So we don't know why it happened. We don't know when it began. We don't know what the end is going to be. We're in the middle of it. So it's hard to see the matter. And that's why I always caution people not to listen to experts. In fact, not to listen to anybody. Because to a great extent it's all nonsense. Things happen. No one a month ago thought that the major topic of discussion in the Western world is whether the President of the United States is all there or not. Why would have told you that? How could that be? So every day is full of surprises. But there are old-time reckonings here that we're not aware of, but that heaven is aware of, and that puts it together. So our task is to do what we are told, and to learn these lessons, and to see that the whole world is Amon Moav Tiaru Sihon. The whole world is, all of these events have a pattern. And that through this pattern, the will of heaven is enforced. And that it's Hakol B'Shvil Yisrael. And that we're the central issue with all of this. Maybe we don't want to be the central issue. But that's not up to us either. No one can predict the future, but the present many times can illuminate the past for us. And that's the idea of Amon Moav Tiaru B'Sichon. So thank you all for coming, and have a very good Shabbat, and stay cool.